Hi, I'm Cynthia Kahn, founder of Amused Now, and I'm here today with Kit Wilson, author. Hi, Kit.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great. Congratulations on your new screenplay and novel, Fall City, which is the true story of a Braniff Airlines stewardess and her best friend, both of whom were killed in the Braniff Flight 250 tragedy of 1966. So, tell us about this project and why you chose to write about the event.
Actually, there was three reasons why I wrote the project. One was that I had an uncle who was a Braniff pilot for about 25 to 30 years, and so I was very familiar with the company. And two, I happened to go to college right side out of Dallas, and at that time, the airlines was changing dramatically in terms of how they're going to brand Braniff, and that was during the Mary Wells era when she took the brand of Braniff and changed it completely with all the uniform changes of the Emilio Pucci uniforms and the planes colors and so forth. So it was a very dramatic period for commercial aviation in terms of how they impacted the traveling public. And third, I knew both of the girls that were killed on the flight. So there's a lot of smoothing over of that period that I wanted to make sure that the history wasn't totally rewritten for a generation that had no clue about what it was like to live in the 60s. So that was another reason to write about that period, because it was a very tumultuous period. And for over a decade, the generation of that time had to deal with not only the Vietnam War, but the anti-race marches and the assassinations of the leaders and the distrust of the government, and just all of that was coming to a confluence during the 60s and radically changed that generation. And so all this was going on while these two girls were going to stewardess school and learning to be an effective ambassador to Braniff to the flying public. So there was a really an ironic twist there. While all this backdrop of dramatic events are going on, they were basically trying to live out a lifestyle that hadn't been available to young women at that time. And rather than go and become a teacher or a wife or a secretary, they had an opportunity to travel and really experience something new.
It's interesting because at that time, being a stewardess was a glamorous position. You had to be beautiful and everything. It was quite different from the way it is today.
Extremely different. And as a matter of fact, most of the flying public today has no idea what it back then. Actually, men wore coats and ties when they boarded an aircraft, and women wore, dresses and heels. And it was an experience because it was a lot more costlier to fly back then. So consequently, it was an adventure as well as an opportunity to travel. So there was a mystique about flying back then that is no longer around anymore. These girls were part of a show, really, that was to entertain the traveling public, and it was important that they look head and shoulders above the competition in terms of the uniforms, the food they offered, the whole ambiance that went on aboard the aircraft. So it was very different.
Most definitely. So, Kit, you've been a writer for over 3 decades, and you work for advertising agencies. You have 4 previous novels under your belt. Give us a little bit about your professional backstory.
Sure. When I got into advertising, which was just after the advent of the Mad Men era, 1967, I was working with advertising agencies in Dallas and then Seattle and Los Angeles, and had an opportunity to work on big accounts like A&M Records and Crystal Cruises, Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom's. But I wanted to not be stuck in a niche, which is very easily done in advertising agencies. So I did a lot of writing as well as art directing and creative directing. So consequently, I was able to write television spots, radio spots, entire campaigns. So and then see them into production, and that only fueled my inspiration for writing after I left the business, and continued to write more for my pleasure as opposed to satisfying a client.
Interesting. how other careers lead you to have skills for your next generation career.
Yeah, yeah. And it also taught me that there's a process involved with writing, and you don't walk away from it after your first draft or your second draft. That there's a lot of work to be done with editing and polishing, and you got to be patient with the process. And if you're just getting into it and you feel like you're instantly creative, you're instantly producing finished quality work, well, it just really doesn't happen that way at all.
I agree. I also see from your Google Plus pages that you write scripts based on your short stories. Tell us
Uh-huh.
how you market them.
Well, there's different ways, because each one is a different product. So, taking example, Falls City was I did some marketing research and realized that the market for that was about 72% women ages 25 to 55, and actually, there's more than 54% of the movie-going public in America are women. So they're very serious ticket buyers, and so when I did the market research, I wanted to make sure that that audience was addressed. And so when I finished the script and started approaching Hollywood with it, I wanted to send it to female lead production companies. These were gals like Hilary Swank, Drew Barrymore, Charlize Theron, who have their own production companies and aren't necessarily going to be starring in each vehicle, but they do pick and choose the projects that they work on and make sure that the projects, and usually the female lead projects, will be blessed with their monetary funds and also with the production values that come with the production companies. So that's what I did with Fall Cities. I approached those production companies that were owned by lead female artists in Hollywood. And then I also approached Mad Men art directors or production designers or costume designers who would be interested in that period of time and realized that the nuances of the costumes were just as important as the lead characters in the story. So, you have to really be focused and very targeted in terms of how you want to approach your script.
Is that it is very important to do your homework and research and know what markets will be more amenable to reading and producing the film.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing too is before you package that product and actually get it out there to those targeted markets, you have to have it thoroughly edited by a professional. You have to proofread and edited by a professional. And then I would recommend getting at least 2 to 3 Hollywood readers to read the script first before you actually package it, put it in the mail, and send it to somebody for a serious read, because it's got to look top-notch professional from first page to the end.
So when you say Hollywood reader, is that someone in Hollywood that you know to just give their opinions to you about the script?
Well, for everybody who doesn't have a connection to a Hollywood reader, they're available for hire. And of course, you have to do some research about that as well. But I would highly recommend getting at least one professional reader to go through your script and make notes and give notes, so that you're a little bit more aware of what the script is doing to someone who's used to reading them and used to critiquing them, and otherwise you're coming from a humongous blind spot.
Then who do you consider to be your biggest influencers?
Fortunately, when I was in high school and college, my second interest besides advertising was English and English literature. So my biggest influences from writing would be Ernest Hemingway and John O'Hara and John Steinbeck, some of the classic American writers who tried to pick and choose their words for their stories with as little flowery language as possible. So I tend to write like that as well. I'll go back and voraciously edit my own words so that it strips it down to the real nitty gritty. Nowadays, when people don't read as much as they used to, and the younger generation, they really get put off by any kind of flowery language or unnecessary verbiage in your literature. So, yeah, it helps to be to the point.
So you have Facebook pages for all your books. You have a LinkedIn account. Obviously, we talked about how you're on Google Plus. Do you
Hmm.
have a personal website?
I do. It's actually for this film script. It's called fallcitymovie.com, and
Okay.
that's an active site. And then, of course, my books are available online on Barnes& and Noble and Amazon, Etsy, and the Book Patch.
How do you use social media to connect with new fans and promote your work?
I find that Facebook is probably one of the best ones. LinkedIn is another best good one, and then I'm just started using Google. And within those circles of potential market people, I'm finding that it's doing very well. The old traditional ways of sending out press releases to magazines and newspapers and news media outlets just isn't quite the same. It's not as instantaneous. So consequently, the social media route is the way to go.
One quick question. Very few people that I interview use LinkedIn as a social media resource. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you use it?
Yeah, when I first joined it and I listened to my experience, my professional experiences, then immediately I started being linked to people that were either in the profession or in a peripheral sense in the profession. So I went ahead and linked with those people, and it just kind of snowballed. They had other people that were working in peripheral businesses, and as it turns out, when you're working in advertising, then you're going to be eventually crossing paths with people that do commercial production for TV and radio and commercial enterprises for mass marketing. So whether they're cinematographers or they're writers for commercials or they're production houses, as time goes on, you cross paths with them, and eventually you're going to be crossing paths with people that are actively working in Hollywood doing both commercial work and professional film projects.
Good deal. So, since Amused Now is about artists helping artists, and you've given a lot of great advice today, but is there anything that you want to share with new budding writers that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Well, I'm probably going to repeat something that a lot of other writers have said, but the important thing about writing is that you do it every day. And you don't have to do it, for hours and hours and hours. Set aside 1 to 2 hours a day and just make sure that as a habitual ritual, you sit down and write. And don't be concerned about editing it and changing it and cleaning it up. Just write. And eventually, at the end of the week, at the end of a 3 or 4 days stretch of time, then you might go back and see what you've done and clean it up. And then two other things, I would highly recommend linking up with an editor, someone that maybe is not going to work with you all the time, but at least works with you when you're ready to present your project to the public. Make sure that their eyes are on it and they effectively go over it and make recommendations about what should be done to it to make it polished. And then in the terms of screenwriting, you have to have a professional reader look at it. Maybe it's just one time, but you've got to have somebody that is used to looking at scripts all the time and can spot the weaknesses immediately and address them so that you can be ready to go back and clean it up, because screenwriting is basically rewriting.
Kit, it has been terrific talking with you today. I'd like to keep in touch because early next year we're going to be launching an e-commerce site for Amused Now, and I'd love to have your work on our network.
Sure. Look forward to it. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to share what I've learned, and hopefully other people will gain something from it.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Kahn, founder of Amused Now. This featured artist presentation has been brought to you by Amused Now Entertainment, a website that enables artists to profit from their creativity. To learn more about Amused Now, visit us at www.amusednow.com or email me at ckahn@amusednow.com.